doing a lot on a specific contract that I'm getting up, and it's been taking a huge amount of my time, and this is also my busiest time of year, so. The sign-in sheet is on the back of this because I forgot the regular one, so if you haven't signed in, sign in afterwards. The presentation is for your entertainment only and for your education. There's no professional accounting or anything like that, so if you hear anything tonight you like, you can talk to Ricky, because he is a professional and he does this professionally. But if you hear any accounting or anything, any tax-wise, take it to your accountants and stuff. Don't rely on any of us, because we don't know anything. And then this is Ricky Warnick.
Yeah, put Warnick together.
Warnick. And he's property manager. He's been doing it for about 6 years. He does it at the Sales Team. That's where we used to meet many years ago. It's over by the stadium in Midland. And do you do Odessa too?
Yes.
Okay, so he property manages Odessa and Midland. So take it away, Ricky.
All right, I appreciate that. And I cannot give, if you understand, no legal advice. I can't give any legal advice. I'm going to start these at the end. If you guys would take one and pass them down, if you would please. That's basically information about the Sales Team Property Management. And I've got a couple of cards in there for you. Just kind of for your information, as property owners, when you purchase or
You want to get on that side, Ricky?
yeah, I'd be better probably for everybody. How many of you are familiar with seller's disclosure notices? Yes. Okay. Now you understand, even as an owner of a property, you have to, even if you've never lived in that property, you've never seen that property, you still have to fill out a seller's disclosure notice when you sell that property. And even if it's a duplex, you would still need to do that. And the ramifications of not doing that seller's disclosure notice, you could lose the deal, because the buyer could back out if they don't receive that notice. And in your information, I've got a little bit of information, I included that in there as well. So seller's disclosure notices are important, and I felt like all of you guys would know that. As investors, y'all know a lot more about investment than I do. I know how to manage properties. I know how to list and lease properties. I know how to list and sell properties. I know how to represent buyers of properties. I'm not an investment expert. I'm not a lawyer. Also, if you already have a realtor, I'm not soliciting your business. I'm not trying to take your business away from that realtor, because we get in a lot of trouble for doing that. So that's not what I'm doing. This primarily is for just for your information, and it tells you in our property management team. Of course, we've got pictures and a little bit of bio about me, and then Carol Garza and Justine Vidania work with me as property managers at the sales team. And that gives you information on how we do business, and there's a little bit of information on the very last page about evictions. And that's something that none of us like to do, but it's actually, I was telling Vanessa, I've done more this year than I've ever done in evictions, which I hate that, but that's part of the business. And as a property manager, with the sales team, we have the whole sales team that backs up property management. My broker is Laura Sales. Her husband is also a broker, Brian Sales. He's the president and CFO of the business, but she is the sponsoring broker. And we are located in Midland. We do properties in Odessa, Ector County, and in Midland County. We have, as part of our sales team, property management. We do properties also in Big Spring, if any of you guys have any interest in Big Spring. We also do property management, and have an agency in the Metroplex in Burleson, in that area. So if y'all have any holdings or interests over there, we can take care of that over there as well. But I guess I would like to answer any specific questions any of you might have.
How'd they get a thing all the way out there?
They're growing their agency. They're growing their agency, so they had an opportunity to buy a Century 21 over there. And that particular brokerage had, I think they had 21 agents in place. So when they bought that, when they purchased that, they had it on the ground, it was a bird nest on the ground. They had a business. I think the property management part of that business there went with the sellers of the agency. That was going to be their mailbox money, if you will, when they moved on. And so they're building property management there now. But we have a property manager in-house for Big Spring. Carol, Justine, and I take care of Midland, Odessa area, or Midland County, Ector County. We have a property in Monahans that we take care of. We're not adverse to taking care of properties in other towns in the area. Some of them it really would not pay us. I mean, if we have one property, depending on who the owner is, if he has several properties that we take care of already, then absolutely we'll go take care of that. But if we have a property over there that rent income on that property is $1,300 a month, one trip for me to Andrews is our management fee. So it's not feasible to do that. Now, we are wanting to grow our business. We are at about 130 doors right now. That's fluctuating some. We've got a lot of owners who want to sell. They're tired of it. They don't know what the market's going to do. They're afraid of interest rates, or they've had bad experiences with tenants. They just said, we want out. You know, what will it sell for? I totally understand that. And as a property manager, my job is to keep you separated from that tenant. And as Vanessa goes, and tell me your name again.
Jennifer?
Jennifer. Do you do property management, Jennifer? Okay. As a property manager, our goal is to keep distance between the tenant and the owner. We prefer that the tenant doesn't even know the owner's name, and they'll see it on the lease, obviously. But we don't want them to have contact with that owner. And some owners want to have a hand in things that go on, and that's fine. But we can't let that relationship build to the extent that that tenant circumvents us and goes to that owner, because then we don't get paid. He'll start paying the owner. And at that point, we have to, usually we'll just end that relationship, because the owner knows that that's not supposed to happen. But our goal is to serve our owners. We work for the owner. And to the best of our ability, we take care of that owner. And that's what Vanessa's going to do. And if Jennifer ever starts doing that, that's what she will do. But we have a track record in Ector County and in Midland County. We have a good track record. You can probably go online and find where people have been aggravated at us and say ugly things, but you can find that anywhere, because that happens. And sometimes we make mistakes. But one of the things we try to do, if we do, we try to fix those mistakes. But our goal is for you as investors, if you don't already have a realtor and you would think about the sales team as your management company, is for you to have a cash flow income on a monthly basis. We take care of the vendors for repairs. We notify the owner what repairs need to be taken care of. As you guys know, as investors and property owners, biggest repairs are HVAC and water heaters usually. And HVAC can be thousands of dollars, Matthew knows, because he does them.
Yeah.
Water heaters typically $1,200 to $1,500 on a water heater, depending on what size it is. So those are two big ones and when it happens, you have to fix them. You have to take care of it. We have a reserve that we have in our accounts. It's agreed on with the owner at the onset of the management that is there to pay for maybe an emergency service call over a weekend or something. Well, it's not going to cover an HVAC or a water heater. So we contact the owners for those things. If it's something smaller than that, we typically pay for it out of the reserve, let the owner know, hey, we've had to make this repair, we need to bring that reserve back to where it needs to be.
It's a reserve with you or a reserve with each unit?
It's reserved with each unit. Yeah.
In terms of a vendor list, do y'all build a vendor base if you're expanding into a new market? Like if you were taking over a portfolio in my hands, you would find vendors?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we want to, if possible. Now, and I'm glad you brought that up, because the owner that we do work for that has several properties in Midland is the reason we took the Monahans property. He has a preferred HVAC company that does all of his, he's a business owner as well, but that particular company does all of his HVAC work. So if there's a need in Monahans, we're gonna send them to Monahans, because they have a relationship with him, and he pays them a certain way. We never see those bills.
Gotcha. In terms of the seller's disclosure, it's not required for duplex, but it's best practice to actually do that personally. However, my question is townhouses. Townhouses are technically single dwellings.
Single family residence,
So
yep.
that would require a disclosure.
Yeah, best practice is always to do a seller's disclosure notice where or if it could be required. Now, yes, Vanessa?
For the reserves, is there like a percentage or an amount that you
We just set an
recommend?
amount,
Okay.
and a lot of times it's based on what the property's gonna rent for.
Okay,
Some of the higher income properties will have a higher reserve, because usually they're newer properties.
right.
And a repair is gonna cost more typically with that newer property.
Okay.
We would love to have them all be the same. In all honesty, all owners can't really afford to do that. Have that amount. It's not taken out monthly, it's taken out one time, but it's kept at that amount as it's used. We have some properties that I call distressed properties, and there's no amount of fixing that, without just redoing everything, that's gonna fix that usually. But because of loyalty to that owner and because of past business with that owner, we'll try to help them in any way we can. I don't do repairs as a property manager. I'm not licensed, although I was a master electrician for over 30 years. I no longer have a license. I'm nearly 75 years old. I'm not gonna crawl on a roof. I'm not gonna crawl under a house. I'm not gonna change out a hot water heater because of liability. We have vendors that do that. And those costs are usually taken out of that month's rent. If it's gonna cost more than that month's rent, we go to the owner and say, hey, we're gonna need some help with this one. And roofs are another big one, but insurance takes care of most roofs. There's a deductible, and then the insurance companies will pretty much take care of that.
In terms of a service call that is, say, the tenant's child flushes a set of toy keys down the toilet, and your plumber has to take that out, y'all pay that initially out of reserves, and that's added to tenant?
We charge it back to the tenant, yes. Not just keys or toys, and that's happened. That happened at my house when my kids were little. My daughter's Barbie dolls kept disappearing. And I was doing the plumbing at that time, and I kept digging pieces out of the sewer. So I know how that works, but we charge it back to the tenant. It's caused by the tenant pays for it. If there's a hair clog and that tenant has just moved in, we're probably not gonna charge them for the first one. But if there's a hair clog after that, they're gonna pay for it. So anything that could be tenant caused, the tenant will get a charge back for that.
In terms of the filters for the HVAC, is the tenant required to replace those?
They're required to replace those. The lease says once a month. Do they replace them once a month?
No.
No, but if they go out, if an HVAC guy goes out and there's a failure of equipment and it's caused by that filter, that tenant's gonna pay for that. And we had one tenant that was in a newer townhome. Their dog continually urinated on the condenser. And the acid ate up the coil on that condenser. And they bought a brand new condenser and replaced it out of pocket. So, yes, they do have to pay for the stuff that they mess up. At move out, there's normal wear and tear, and then there's damage that was caused that they didn't fix or repair when they moved out. We take that out of the deposit. If there's a default in the lease, we keep that deposit. And there, as I was talking to Vanessa and Matthew, there's only 3 ways to get out of a lease in Texas. if you're in the military, if there is sexual stalking, or if there is domestic violence. But they have to come on paperwork to prove all three of those. And they can be loosed from a lease. Now, if there's damage, you still take that money out of that deposit. If they've done well, then you give them their deposit back. So, well, then you can evict them. And that does happen.
That's the most common way.
Yeah.
We've had tenants this past year that know how the eviction process works. They will milk it to the last day, even after a court appearance. They won't move out until that constable is ready to show up with the locksmith.
If they milk it to the last, how long would it take from the day you actually file the eviction till you get them out? 22 days or?
No, it could take up to a month.
Okay.
What we do, when we file our notices, it's a 3-day notice, beginning the day after we file the notice. So the first day is actually the day after. If they haven't moved out by midnight of the third day, we go to court and we file a petition for eviction at the courthouse. But you also have to file and prove that they are not in the military. Or if they are in the military, there's some difficulty involved with evicting folks. But you have to prove that, you have to turn that paperwork in. Filing fee is about $154 per adult or per person responsible for payment on the lease. All of that is owner costs. An eviction can cost upwards of about $1,500 because we charge $50 an hour for running around doing the court calls, filing the paperwork, going to court, hassling with the tenants. Usually our part's $250, $200, $250. The rest of it would be to have a moving company come over, to have a locksmith come over, to pay it when you get your writ of possession, to have a constable come out, and then you have to pay for all of those services. And from the time that you post that notice to, let's say they just took it to the last day, it could be close to a month, because sometimes you can't get a court date after you've gone to the courthouse and filed your eviction. They'll give you a court date 2 weeks later. Well, they're living there for free for those 2 weeks. Actually, they're living there for free until you get them out of the house. And the ones that know how to do that will take advantage of it. Some of them will get out immediately. And that process, from day one, we start drive-by to see if there's movement on them getting out of the house. If we think for a minute that they're out of the house, even if they haven't notified us, I have keys. I'll go in. If that house is empty, I get a locksmith out there, and we change the locks because they have vacated the house. So
What if a bunch of junk's still left in it?
usually, and the owner has to pay to haul that off.
How will you justify that you know that they're out?
Well, if they're not there and there's no clothes in the closet and their beds are gone, usually they're gone. So we've had some where they've left mattresses on the floor. They've left clothes or coats or something in the closet, but you can tell they're not living there anymore. Refrigerators usually full of rotten food. It'll be trashed, and you can tell nobody's living there. You have to be careful. You really do have to be careful, because you can violate people's rights if you get in there too soon. I don't let the ladies that I work with do that, even if they're the ones that post the notice. Usually I go with them to do that, or I'll post the notice and have them take pictures while I'm doing it. Typically, I'll go look at the house. If someone's going inside, I'll go inside, because I'm not going to let them go inside. Maybe I'm old-fashioned about that, I don't know. I just feel like I don't want them doing that. I don't want them being jeopardized physically.
Do you add any cost on to the repairs? If you send an electrician out, do you do like 10% more?
If someone's living there,
No,
or if we're evicting them?
for your landlord. Do you
Oh,
charge them
no,
more?
it's whatever that bill is,
Okay.
and it comes out of the rent. Yeah. Now, if we charge late fees, we keep late fees. Those don't get passed to the owner. We're the one that has to chase the tenants, and that needs to be worth something to do that. Now, our charge is 10% of the gross month's rent. Some folks think that that's a lot of money. Some owners do, but if I rent a house, if I'm managing a house, it's $1,200. I get $120 a month. If I have to go out there 2 times that month, it's already costing me money. And, you know, so I want to offer the same service to those guys as I do to the guys that I'm making $400 a month. So there's no discrimination there, but some owners don't understand that. They think that I need to be there, and I have some of them tell me that. What will you do in this circumstance? I had one that, and I didn't answer him correctly, and it made him mad, and I didn't get the business. I knew what the process was, but he didn't hear what he wanted to know that the process was. If we had a hot water heater, the pilot light had gone out on. Well, I know the first thing you do is check the pilot light, see if it's working. See if it's not working, or why not? Well, that's not how I answered it. I said, well, I would get somebody to go out, and his response was, so you're gonna cost me money before you know what it is? Well, you know, how do I respond back to that? So I'd already kind of burned my bridge with him. But regrettably, you know, that happens sometimes. But again, with over 40 years in construction, I know what to do. I just don't go out and do it myself now. Typically, we basically, because there's liability involved. There really is, and you guys know that. There's liability involved. We require our owners to have a certain amount of liability insurance with a sales team named as other insured on those policies. You all know that if you get sued by somebody, they're going to go after everybody that's part of that process, and they think realtors are all multimillionaires, so they go after us as well as y'all, because they think you're rich too. So we all want to be, and I want to help you get there. I want you to be. But
If you were taking over a large portfolio of properties, would it still be the base 10% gross rent? Or would you?
no, we don't change that.
In terms of the move-in, move-out procedure, do y'all take pictures of the property before move-in and after move-out for documentation on damage?
Yeah, we have all of that. We have, in fact, we do take pictures. We have the tenants fill out an inventory form that's pretty well self-explanatory, and it's for their protection as well as our protection, because there may be things we didn't see that they did see. But if there's obvious damage, we're going to go to that owner and say, hey, this is something that needs to be taken care of. This hole needs to be patched. I'm smelling gas around the heater closet. The disposal didn't work, dishwasher didn't work. Sometimes we don't know that until we get a tenant in there. But yes, we do. We're aware of any kind of obvious damage, and we try to get that taken care of prior to move, especially that property is clean. A lot of times the tenants have let the yard go before they move out, or over the process of a month of leasing it. The grass will grow up in the summertime, so we try to keep that mowed down. Well, those are owner expenses, and we don't have money anymore in that property if you know, we're trying to get it leased. So we would come back to an owner and say, hey, do you have a yard guy that you want to go out? If you don't, we do, but you'll have to pay to have that done.
Do you have any owners that rent out furnished apartments?
Seems like, yes, I do. I actually have a duplex.
How do you handle that situation in general?
We just determine what the rent's going to be.
Yeah.
And other than that, because we take into consideration that they are furnishing that property.
So there's just more involved in the inventory checklist before and after?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. They go great, and some owners, that's what they're looking for, and a lot of times they will be furnished because of that. We try to be careful on corporate leases, because if it's going to be a corporate lease, it's going to put an upper management guy in that house as opposed to 6 guys that are out working on pumps or on a rig all day. Big difference, huge difference. Those 6 guys are not going to take care of that property. They don't care. And they're going to wear their dirty clothes and their greasy boots, and they're not going to clean it. They're not going to mow the yard. But if you have an upper management person that does that, now, do we have that situation? Yes, I do. Can we make that stuff happen? Yes, we can, and we do for that owner. but you have to be aware of those things. You
Right.
cannot discriminate in any
Mhm.
way, but owners can say, an owner owns a property, it's his property. He
Right.
can determine, as long as it doesn't break fair housing
Mhm.
or HUD regulations.
Right.
An owner can say, I don't want a crew in there.
Mhm.
And if I have, and I get approached a lot of times, well, we have 4 guys that are on a crew, and my first question or they'll say we have a crew, and my first question is, are they hot bunking? Do you know what that is?
No, I don't.
Yeah, who knows what hot bunking is? Okay.
I'm guessing one swings out and the other one swings in.
It's a Navy term. In a submarine, you don't have you don't have as many beds as you have crew. So on a 12-hour shift, this guy gets out of the rack, goes to work, that guy's coming off work, gets in the rack, it's a hot bunk. It's still warm from that other guy getting out. So we don't want that in a property because it's too much wear and tear on that property. Nothing gets done that they're supposed to do because they're working like maniacs, and I understand that. Yes, sir.
What's your philosophy with renters as to the amount of maintenance they should do versus your company or the owner's responsibility?
Well, the lease lays out what they're supposed to do. And typically what they're responsible for, we don't want them doing electrical work, we don't want them doing plumbing, we don't want them doing HVAC. We want them to take care of the yard, to water the yard, to keep it cut, especially if it's an HOA. If it's something simple, like checking the hot water heater, do you know how to do that? Yes, sir, I know how. And I said, well, go in there and tell me if that light's blinking, because nearly all of them today are electronic. There's not many hot water heaters nowadays that are not. Yeah. If the light's blinking, then your hot water heater's working. There's something else going on. Either look, is there any water on the floor? Yes, sir. Then you've got your hot water heater's leaking. We'll need to get somebody out there. So usually when that happens, they have to replace the valves and the lines above the hot water heater. They may have, typically they'll replace a gas line. But you want a licensed person to do that because of liability. And I say that because if somebody goes out and changes out a hot water heater that's not licensed, it can happen to licensed and unlicensed both. But if they're not licensed and they don't get that gas fitting tightened back properly, and that house blows up and kills the people in the house and neighbors, you're probably going to jail. There's not enough money that you can ever pay back to take care of that.
Carbon monoxide too.
Carbon monoxide's the same way. HVAC, if the vent is not put back in place correctly, and that house, carbon monoxide, usually by the time it's got you, it's too late. Because typically you don't smell it. It's,
Do you require carbon monoxide or smoke detectors
We don't.
in all your?
no, with smoke detectors, yes. Carbon monoxide, no. No, it's not a requirement by the state. So we do, when we have a house rekeyed that's a rental property, that house has to have a keyless deadbolt, which means now there's 3 entry bolts or 3 ways to lock that house. Keyless deadbolt, you can lock it from the inside, but you can't see that from the outside. You have to have a peephole and a solid door. Now, the keyless deadbolt and the peephole include the door going into the garage. It's an entry point. And so for the safety of that tenant, you have to have a keyless deadbolt. When they're in that house, they can lock that keyless deadbolt. No one has access to that house unless they let you in. Now, if the garage door is open and somebody comes in through the garage and tries to get in, they've got a peephole there and they hear it. They can see that someone's trying to get in the house. Got a keyless deadbolt, that person he can defeat it. Anybody can defeat a lock if they want to get in badly enough. But that alleviates most of your liability because you've done that according to the property code. Some owners don't want to do that. I tell them that's for your safety, as well as ours, as well as the tenants. And there's a reason that law came into place. It's because something happened that probably would not have happened if that law had been in place at that time. So smoke detectors, and tenants are required to put batteries in smoke detectors. Do they do it every time? No. Now I have some, this is going to sound funny, but I have some of my older tenants that say, Mr. Warnick, can you come out and put batteries in our smoke detectors for us? Sure. So I go out and put a battery in the smoke. Well, they can't get on a ladder. I can, not as good as I used to, but I still can, and absolutely I'll do it for them. Because we also have a fiduciary responsibility to the tenants. But the owner is who employs us.
How do you get the tenants to send you back the condition of the house when you moved in?
The inventory, they're required to turn that in within 7 days. It's in the lease.
If they haven't, you just call them until they.
Yeah, and if they haven't, and we don't have that because, sometimes we would lose track of it and we might not remember that we don't have it back. At their move out, if there's damage that was there when they moved in that perhaps we didn't see, they're gonna pay to have that repaired because they don't have an inventory form that says, hey, there's a big scuff mark in the living room. How can you prove that you didn't do it? You didn't return the form that we asked you to. There's some things we can't make a tenant do. We ask them to. Now, we do walkthroughs. We actually walk through our properties. We schedule those walkthroughs. We typically do them on Thursdays and Fridays. We try to get through every property a couple of times a year. We do drive-bys. A lot of times if I'm out in town and I know I've got 1 or 2 or 3 properties over here, I'll just swing by and look at the yard and, see if anything's broken that I can see, or see what the roof looks like, or see what the fence looks like. With the wind we have out here, there's always that possibility of wind damage. So we don't see everything. I'll drive down alleys sometimes to see if they've mowed behind the alley. HOAs are really strict on that.
How do you handle HOA dues that are, in terms of fees?
We don't, that's, the owners take care of the HOAs. That's still part of their responsibility.
If the tenant has a violation of the HOA,
Yeah.
how is that handled?
Well, the owner will get a letter.
Yeah.
They send me a letter. I contact the tenant. I send them the letter and I say, this must be done immediately or we're gonna come do it and you're gonna get charged for it. So usually, I don't know if any of you guys saw me talking on the phone a while ago. That was part of what that was. Because we had received an HOA and the guy told me, he said, well, I didn't know about behind the fence. And I said, it's in the lease. And we talked about this at the beginning, when y'all signed the lease. You have to cut the grass for an HOA behind the fence in the alley.
Do you require renter's insurance?
We ask them, we can't make them.
Ask what?
Renter's insurance.
You can't require they have it?
You could, an owner can, but they don't always. And I tell everybody, I tell all of my tenants as they're coming in, get insurance. If this house were to burn down, you're not covered if you don't have insurance. You lose everything you own because the owner's insurance is not going to cover your personal property. The way we approach tenants that move in is I like to physically see a new tenant in order to, there's a lot to be said with a face-to-face conversation. And they can't come back later and say, well, you didn't tell me that. And I said, well, actually I did, and it's on the lease. So, we don't always get to do that, but 99% of the time we do.
If you have a person comes in the morning, one at noon and one in the evening, and the next day all 3 of them qualify, do you take the first one come or the best qualified?
Well, first come, first served on the application. So if we get an applicant that submits their application with the application fee, we're gonna look at them first. If they don't qualify, and this is something we talked to the owner about. How do you feel about these folks? There are some things we can't tell an owner that's on an application, but we can be general enough with enough detail that an owner can make up their mind. What do you think about this? If they say, I'm not comfortable with that, then we'll decline that individual. Most of the time, it's because of a pet. Some insurance companies per se, will disallow aggressive breeds of dogs. There's about 14 of them that I know of that they disallow. So if someone has that particular kind of dog, I run that through the owner and I say, okay, they've got a pit bull, weighs 60 pounds. Are you willing to to do that. If they say yes, then we're good to go. If their credit's good, if their background's good, if their rent history's good, if their employment's good, if their income is good, because we have criteria for all of that. If that owner says yes, then that dog's moving in with a pet deposit. If it's a service animal, there's nothing we can do. We can't say no because of that service
How do
animal.
you flesh out service animals?
They have to have a prescription. It has to be a legitimate doctor prescription, and it has to be renewed every 12 months. And you can't talk to individuals about their injuries if they're not obvious. If someone got blown up overseas and missing an arm and a leg, or maybe both arms, and they've got even a monkey that's a service or support animal, we can't deny that animal. And we can see the obvious injury, but if they had a monkey as a service animal that was legitimate that can be verified by a doctor's prescription, but I can't see what's wrong with them, I can't ask them. I can't say, well, why do you have to have this animal? I can say,
The animal does.
yeah, I can say, well, what does your animal do? Or what was your animal trained to do? Now, service animal, you can only have one service animal per whatever injury it serves. You can't have 3 Rottweilers for one injury. So, and some folks try to do that. And
How about emotional support animals?
same thing.
Are they also registered?
Yeah. Yeah, there has to be a doctor's prescription.
In terms of saying in one individual pet per problem, can they have an emotional support animal plus like a CNI dog?
It's possible.
So, okay.
Yeah.
As long as they have documentation
Yeah.
of both of those.
Yeah, if they're blind, obviously, they've got CNI, they'll have that CNI dog. But how did they, we don't know that process. Were they having emotional problems before they came blind? Have they been blind from birth? Was there an accident that could have caused trauma or PTSD? They have to have the dog for their blindness, but they may also need a comfort or emotional animal as well. You have to be really careful because that's fair housing stuff. And you can be fined, penalized and fined for not treating that correctly. So there are guidelines and parameters that can be used for that. We just have to be careful how we do it. And you guys do too.
So going back to the original question, if you had 3 people, you're only going to run one of them at a time?
One at a time.
Okay.
And that's what I tell them. I don't take, the only person's money that we take is the one that we're running. Now, it's a non-refundable fee. So
What do you charge?
we took $50 per applicant 18 and older. If they pay on Venmo, it's $52 because Venmo charges us for doing that. So if they're disqualified, then whoever brought me the second app is next up. And I'll call them and say, hey, the other folks, we couldn't approve them. You guys are up. Are you good to go? Yes, bring me the money because it's first come, first served. If I don't have the money within such and such time, I have other folks whose applications I have. And you'd be surprised how many folks don't show up.
Moving back to renter's insurance,
Mhm.
does your lease require it? Does it say it's required?
You can require it.
Okay, because that'll cover, if a tenant invites a friend over that trips and falls, that renter's insurance will help cover that.
Yes, yes, that's true. That's true. Is it a good idea? Yes. Can we make people do it? No.
No, so personally, I require it.
And you can do
Can't
that.
enforce it.
Yeah, you can do that.
So-
You can require it,
Yeah.
but,
And you guys could, you just don't, right?
yes, and I tell them, what I explained a while ago. Now, if an owner tells me they've got to have renter's insurance, then absolutely, they've got to have rent, and it has to be verified. I have to have a letter from the insurance company stating the dates, and the insurance company needs to notify me if they cancel that policy or if they don't pay for their policy. And we get notifications for the ones that do that, even on owners that have let theirs lapse. So,
I think a minute ago you said there's certain things on an application you can't tell the owner.
mhm.
What would that include?
Well, any specific financial stuff.
Why?
Because it's, you have a fiduciary responsibility to keep that secret.
But
To
the
the-
owner could have pulled it himself.
Well, but he didn't.
Oh.
So it would be like Mary telling me her secrets, and I have a fiduciary responsibility to her. I can't tell anybody her secrets unless she's breaking the law. But if I turn around and said, "Hey, Lee, this is Mary's deal," then I'm the guy that gets in trouble
So
for
you
that.
have those fiduciary duties to the owner and
Yes, you do.
the tenant?
Absolutely.
or
You have to,
potential tenant?
remember on your information about brokerage services, you have to treat all parties.
Mm,
You remember those
Yeah,
four things?
yeah.
Okay, yeah,
okay.
yeah.
That's interesting.
So if an owner says, I wanna do an audit of your credit file to make sure you're taking the proper precautions, how do you respond?
If it's, an owner gets a statement every pay period. They get a statement of.
Oh, no, I'm saying.
They're not gonna look at our personal credit files.
No. That they wanna review the credit screening that you perform on each tenant.
Okay, I can tell them, for instance, I can say there is over a certain amount of money owed. It's owed because of medical expenses without going into detail. I can also say, I'm seeing foreclosures, I'm seeing repossessions without going into specific details. And along with that, I usually say, I recommend that we don't lease to these folks.
He's not talking about necessarily the screening process, he's talking about after you already have all of these tenants, and he wants to make sure that you are screening these tenants to his criteria. Does that make sense?
Agreed upon criteria. I have a particular situation where it would be proven.
Yeah. Now, we have a criteria that comes with their application. I didn't bring that with me. I don't have everything that's on.
What I'm saying is, how does the owner know that you're following that without?
It's in our management agreement. We have to follow certain things. And now, you're going to,
Disclosure of the information that you collect, can you disclose to the owner?
their personal contact information, yes. As far as banking records and things like that, no. Because we are the buffer between the owner and the tenant. So we don't want that relationship between, and I understand what you're saying.
Could you request the tenant to sign a disclosure so you can get access to those documents?
Probably, but we don't. If an owner requested it, we probably could.
It's sort of a specific situation, but.
Yeah. As a general rule, we don't. They're just things we can't divulge. Yeah. Well, it's like a social security number. I know the social security number. I can't tell you their social security number. That's one of the things on the application that we can't do. If I,
Are you able to find out in Texas, the eviction? Or you have to
probably,
actually go to the
that
courthouse?
usually, when we do a background check, that would show up, but not all the time. I've even had, and this is weird, I had a professional tenant move into a property, had no intention of paying the rent after the first month. We checked his rent history. We checked his credit. Credit was a little bit low. The owner said, no, that's fine. I just told him, I said, they're not at the criteria. We like to see a 600 or above, or in some instances, a high 500. And the owners know that. So when I approach them with that, I say, they meet the criteria for their FICO. They meet the criteria. We want to see 1 month's income equal 3 months' rent. They meet the criteria for income. Background check, there's no criminal history that showed up. Rent history, there's no rent history, bad rent history that showed up. We can look at that background on the credit and tell, again, have there been foreclosures, have there been repos, what is their debt related to, whether or not they're probably going to pay rent.
How does the eviction get from being in the courthouse to being part of their record?
Through Appfolio, we turn them over for collections. Now, when there's a judgment at the courthouse, that becomes filed at the courthouse
Right.
as a judgment against them for non-payment of rent, or however they say that. So it's there, it's public knowledge. And if someone wanted to go do research, do landman work on that individual, they could. Actually, you can get online and do that a lot of times. We don't do that. We look at, we check, we verify employment, we verify their rent history, we can call their, and again, can they put somebody, they can put anybody as a former landlord. If people are gonna scam the system, they can scam the system. They're just things that are not feasible for us to do. I'm not a private detective. I'm not an attorney. There are just some things that we're not gonna do. But we do due diligence on each applicant, and we have a pretty good record. But we also have some that they can have the best paperwork in town, they can have all the background checks, they can have wonderful FICO. They can't scam on that I know of. And you don't know what kind of tenant they are until they've been in your property 2 or 3 months, and then it begins to show up. Yes, sir.
Do you manage any multifamily properties?
We don't do anything right now more than duplexes. Will we manage multifamily properties? Yes.
Do you have prior experience doing that?
I'm sorry?
Do you have prior experience with multifamily?
I don't have a lot of experience with multifamily.
So just based on your general business knowledge, which is a more enjoyable thing to manage? Single family or multifamily?
Single family.
Why is that?
Because, with multifamily, you have a plethora of problems that can all show up at one time on one property. Can we do it? We absolutely can. Do we have the background for it? No, we do not. We have enough background to be able to do it. Can we? There are just some things that go with multifamily. Now, multifamily, again, you have, and I have to be real careful how I say this, to not discriminate. It's fair housing. Generally, there are just some things that come with that type of property that you don't have with single family. But single family has its own problems, if you
Single
will.
family has a larger pool of tenants.
Yeah.
So you can typically more qualified tenants.
Yeah, well said. Yeah. But multifamily would be, and would we take all multifamily? We vet our properties. We don't take every property we're asked to take. I go look at them. I'll look at past history. If they've been on MLS before, I'll look at that. Of course, I look at the assessments to see what the property's assessed at. I'll drive the neighborhood, see what the properties around that property look like. That property from the street, unless I have the owner's permission to go inside and look at it. And there are some properties I just won't take because it's going to be cost prohibitive to do it. Now, I will, to the best of my ability, not legally, but with my knowledge of construction and property management, I can advise that owner generally on what it would take to get that property to where it would be a viable property. But I have seen properties where a little bit of lipstick and rouge were put on them, but they're by no means a good property. They look good for a little while, and then they just start falling apart. And that costs the owner, that costs us a lot of time. Usually they're lower rents. We don't make a lot of management fee off of them, and the difficulties that go with that are hard on the owner. And I hate to call an owner 3 or 4 or 5 times in a month and say, hey, air conditioner's not working again, or the heater's not working again. And so at some point, when that continues to happen and that owner does not seem to be incentivized to take care of that problem, at the end of that management agreement, I'll just give the owner 30-day notice and just say, we're not going to be able to manage your property. And that's up to the owner. We're and you guys I don't have to be specific, y'all know what I'm talking about. You've all seen properties like that.
In terms of going back to the, what's it called, criminal report, certain felonies are protected. What information can you provide the owner as far as that goes?
I can just say that there is some criminal report, and
Do you have a criteria for which?
if there's a criteria, it depends on what they were convicted of and how long ago that
Can
happened.
the owner have a specific criteria? So let's say like take DUI for instance.
Yeah.
Let's say non-lethal, nothing bad happened,
Yeah.
but they were convicted of a DUI.
Yeah.
Can I specifically exclude that as the owner from your screening criteria for my property?
You can, but whenever you disallow an application, you have to send a letter explaining why you disallowed that application. So you have to give them the reason why.
Yeah, but as the owner that has multiple properties,
Yeah.
it's not discriminatory because it's blanket across all my properties.
Yeah.
I don't allow DUI convicted.
Well, you're gonna get it, and I'm not an attorney.
That's fine.
You'd have to talk to an attorney. There's a possibility of fair housing issues if you do that.
But in turn, do you have specific things that,
You can have criteria, let's say it this way, Matthew, maybe this will encapsulate what you're wanting to know. As long as it does not discriminate based on about 9 different things today, as far as that individual himself or herself, as long as it does not discriminate according to FHA, HUD, or fair housing, you can have all the criteria you want, as long as it does not broach or breach any of those rules.
and as a property manager, do you have specific screening criteria for specific owners, or you just have a blanket?
No,
Do you
we
do
have,
that?
yeah, we have the application process. And in answer to your question about DUIs, I might tell that owner without being specific. There was an arrest 7 years ago. It was not what would be considered egregious. It was not murder, manslaughter, anything like that.
Are those similar murder, manslaughter things that an automatic no on your current screening process?
That probably, well, maybe not manslaughter, but murder would be. Yeah, involuntary, yeah. And I would even say a DUI that happened 5 years ago, and there's nothing since then. And I've talked to that individual and met that individual. People do things when they're 18 that when they're 23, they're not going to do. A lot of times. Now, some of them still will, but many of them, maybe they've gotten a family in the last 5 years. Maybe they have children. Maybe they have a job now where they're making $13,000 a month.
So to answer my question, you do have criteria, specific things that are disallowed?
Well, if they're a sexual predator, we're not going to rent to them. If there's anything to do with sex, we're not going to rent to them. Now, when I say sex, let me qualify that. If there has been a sexual crime committed, has nothing to do with what people do sexually, unless they have committed a sexual crime. If they've committed a sexual crime, we're not going to rent to them. And they're supposed to be on a database somewhere if they've done that. And you can check that. So, yes, sir.
How would you suggest dealing with it? Those confrontational stuff that the staff.
We've had that a lot of times. You be respectful to them, and if they are threatening in any way, talk to the owner and say, you know, this guy is a threat. I believe he's physically dangerous. We might want to consider looking at his lease, and if he's done something like that, if there's been a police report because of that, Yeah, he's probably gonna be evicted, or asked to move. I'm sorry? Not for lack of payment, but if there's been, yeah, breach and lease. And really, that's the only way you can evict somebody, if there's been a breach of the lease. I have a lot of people that are confrontational. Not a lot. But I do have them. I've had them that have talked ugly to me and this, that, and the other. I don't bow up. Now, when I was at your age, I probably would have, and I might have got my butt kicked. But I don't bow up. I'm yes or no, sir. How can we deal with your concerns or your questions? How can I help you? I see that you have a problem. I see that you have a concern. I probably have an answer. Let's talk about it in a civil way. And I really do. I mean, I've come a long way in the last few years because I didn't used to be that way. I think age has something to do with that. Yes, sir.
And the level of degree because you involve with your clients. In your current client, do you have remote investors and how you communicate with them? In what manner?
They have access to us 24/7 through I wear my cell phone's by my side 24/7.
So how much are they involved? Zero is like a totally hands-on, like maybe 10 is always call them, they always call you. So what's the level?
We don't have a set. We communicate with them to the extent that they want to be communicated with, unless there's a problem, and then we communicate with them. I'm not at all bashful when there's a problem about calling. I'm not bashful about going and knocking on their door and saying, hey, we need to talk about this.
Would there be like a monthly or quarterly briefing something?
No, we use Appfolio, which is a bookkeeping portal whereby the tenant can pay and we can pay the owner. Bills can be paid. They can communicate with us by text or email, communicate with us by text through the portal. Obviously, they can call us anytime. But when we do walkthroughs, of course, we're in communication with them. If we see with a drive-by, we see a problem, we're in communication with them. If they don't want to be communicated with and there's no problems, then there's no communication.
If a owner specifically requested a monthly or a quarterly report, is that something you would provide?
The owner gets a monthly report. Yeah.
Do you all do things like make the mortgage payment on the property, pay the property taxes, the insurance payment? Do you deposit the money in the bank account of the
money? If the owner wants to be paid that way, we can set that up in Appfolio, and that owner will be paid directly in his bank account. Typically, our rents are due on the 1st, past due midnight on the 3rd. We pay owners on the 10th unless it's on a holiday or a weekend, and then it would be the next business day.
You all hold the deposits though?
We have a tenant trust account, which is a totally separate account that the deposits are held in. That's not the owner's money, that's not our money, that's the tenant's money. All of the payments that are going to be distributed to the owner, less any repairs that need to be done, and less management fees, are held in the owner trust account. So there are two separate accounts, never cross unless we're transferring deposit over here to pay to the owner, or we're transferring deposit over here to pay back to the tenant. So we're very careful about that. But no, sir, we don't do mortgage payments or taxes or anything. Those are owner responsibilities. I don't know of any management companies that do that. They may, I'm just not aware of it. That's a lot of bookkeeping.
Right, but see, for out-of-state owners, owners that have accounts in local banks, I mean, it's possible to have it like auto-deduct from the bank account, the rent comes into the account and it gets deducted from there. So it's possible to set it up like that.
Well, it could be. We're not bookkeepers, we're property managers. So I don't think that's something that we probably would want to do. We would want that to be the owner responsibility.
You know, send at the end of the year, you send out 1099s?
Yes,
to
sir,
owners?
we do.
Do you send out 1099s minus the repair costs or just gross 1099s?
It's gross.
And then the owners have to,
Owner has a statement and their
CPA.
their
kind of does
CPA
the
can sort that out, yes, sir.
How do you receive payments?
We can do it ACH, some people, a few, not many, bring, we were talking about this earlier, bring checks. I've got a couple that bring cash, and I hate that.
ACH, do you pull it out of their account or they send it to you?
If we don't pull it, it's taken out of their account and paid into the Appfolio, into our account through Appfolio, into
But
the
they
owner
send
trust
it.
account.
They send it, you don't pull it.
Right, right, yeah. Now, some of them set up to have it done on the first of the month. And I said earlier, you know, if we have to collect late fees, the owner doesn't get that, we do. We have a flat rate, $150 late fee. If they don't pay by midnight on the 3rd, they're gonna get a $150 late fee.
wow.
And if they haven't paid by the 10th, when we pay the owner, the next business day, they're gonna get a notice on their door for eviction after we've contacted the owner to tell them that.
Why do you wait that long?
Because we pay the owners on the 10th. So it's possible they could pay us between the midnight on the 3rd and the 10th.
But you could file earlier if it was your policy.
We could, but we have some folks, if they'll notify me and say, hey, my check got messed up. What I don't like to hear is, well, we accidentally made a car payment. And what I want to say, I don't, is do you want to live in your car or do you want to live in a house? Which is more important? I know you have to have a car. I don't say that, but I'm thinking that too. So, but that does happen. But if they notify me and say, hey, Rick, I know tomorrow's the 3rd, but I'm not going to get paid until Friday. Can I bring it to you Friday? And I say, absolutely, but you still owe me $150 for late fee. And that happens. We don't want to be ogres. We're not going to pound on somebody. But if they're consistently late, if they're late 2 or 3 or 4 months in a row, we're gonna be, if not sooner, we're gonna be talking to that owner about, hey, we need to think about posting a notice to evict these guys unless you're okay with this. If you're okay with it, we are. We don't like it, but if you're okay, we are. But if you don't like it, we can post a notice and go through that process, and we could get you a new tenant. And usually, in today's market, that usually can happen within about a month, within less than 30 days. But 30 days lack of rent can hurt.
Can you close it up by telling us your most memorable tenant, good or bad? You choose.
I want one of both.
Well,
Only one.
Can I tell you a story? Can I tell you a story about this gentleman? He was a patient of mine.
Okay.
He was so smart. He would file for bankruptcy every month or every other month. As soon as the bank started foreclosure processes, he would file bankruptcy, and then when they're about to, and then he would withdraw the bankruptcy. So then they would try to foreclose on him again, and he would file bankruptcy again. So he did that like for a whole year, or 2 years. He just kept filing and unfiling bankruptcy. He knew the procedures really well.
he came in the system.
Oh yeah, he was very good. He had the money, he just didn't want to pay. He did that. I learned something that day.
Yeah.
Like, there are people who can do that. I didn't know it. Because it takes the bank 60 to 90 days to update the paperwork that, okay, this person has filed bankruptcy, but that makes it last 6 months. But then he withdraws the bankruptcy, so he has never actually filed bankruptcy and
Right,
gone through the bankruptcy. But
Wow.
and if you know how to do the paperwork, you don't need a lawyer for it. You can just do it yourself.
That's why.
Okay, Rick.
Well, let me tell you guys this. In Midland County, there are 413 active listings for sale as of today. There are 76 properties for sale, listed for lease as of today. That inventory is shrinking. When that inventory shrinks, prices begin to go up. In 2020, we had probably close to 200 properties for lease. In 2018, it got down to less than 30. We could charge anything we wanted to, and people would pay it. So typically, whatever the owner, unless it was totally outrageous, he said, I want $3,000. We could probably get it if it was a nice one. There are new listings in the last 7 days for sale, 126. Last 30 days, 458. Sold last 90 days in Midland County are 604. Months of inventory on the market today in Midland County is 2.05 months of inventory. The national is much higher than that. Midland County and Ector County have always been a little bit different than that. Median price in Midland County is $325,810. So the very middle price of houses sold is $325,000. Medium square footage is $162.39 a foot. Now this is cool. What I'm fixing to tell you. Median days on the market for a listing to sell is 24 days. And of those houses that sell, probably 97 or 98% sold at the list price that was asked. Now, that's a good market, guys.
Rent,
Depends on which side you're on.
Yeah. Well, for sellers, it's a pretty good market.
what's the rent price? Is it $1.50?
Rent prices, right now, it's hard to say, Sam. Used to, we could say $1 a foot, $1.10 a foot, but I see a lot of fluctuation. It's premature because we are not in a boom the way we were in 2018, 2017, 2018.
I just rented a property in Odessa for like $1.65.
How much?
$1.65 a foot
And that's high. For rent?
for rent.
Well, I say it's high. It depends on where the property is and what kind of property it is. So it's everything is relative to location.
It's 1% of the appraised value per month.
Possibly,
That's what it is.
yeah, possibly. Because I've used I used to use the $1 a foot, depending on what the property was. I don't think I saw it $1.65, but I've seen it $1.35, $1.45. But we like to go out, and I'm going to get to that. I'm sorry, late. We like to go out and look at the properties, and we do comps on the properties. I had an owner last night that said, I want $2,500. I said, your property's not worth $2,500. I'm sorry, but it's just not. But we'll address that. Probably worst one I've ever had was we evicted a lady a couple of months ago. It took $1,600 worth of cleanup to hire somebody and just haul the trash out of the house and out of the backyard. Along with the trash in the backyard, they found 4 dead puppies that had starved to death. And it took another $600 to clean the house after all the trash was taken out of it. That's probably the worst one I've ever seen. Probably some of the best I've had some tenants that pay rent like clockwork. Boom, boom, boom. They move out. The house is in perfect condition. They fulfilled all the requirements of the lease on move out. We're glad to give them a good referral and their deposit back. We've had some that have defaulted, something out of their control. And that conversation goes like, you're going to lose your deposit. You still owe me rent until I get it rented again. And they move to wherever they move to. They pay rent every month until I rent it again. I release them from the lease, but we keep their deposit. So I've seen really, really bad and gamers that game the system. And I've seen some folks that are just really good. You meet every walk of life as a property manager, and as an owner. You meet people at their best and you meet people at their worst. And my heart is to give them the benefit of the doubt until they prove me otherwise. That's for owners and tenants. I have some contrary owners too, so, you know.
With that situation where they moved away, but they still paid rent and lost their deposit anyway, who got the deposit?
The owner did, after repairs were made, or touch-ups or whatever needed to happen, yeah. The owner did. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you. Just remember, I'm not soliciting. I'm not soliciting. If you have a realtor, use your realtor. If you don't, call me.
You did a good job.
Thank you, Lee. Thanks for having me. I've enjoyed visiting with y'all.